I recognize the familiar.
Back row, sit back, just like the classroom.
Hi, Gary, how are you? Good. I assume you're here. Yes, I am here in an official capacity. Good.
On behalf of the Citizens Coalition who organized tonight's forum, first of all, can everybody hear me? Unfortunately, we had a little difficulty trying to find a room that anywhere in town tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on. So we apologize, we don't have a room that has a PA system in it. So we'll ask the candidates, and I will try to, in my brief comments, try to speak loudly so people can hear. We welcome each of you, candidates, and our moderator, Kitty Rhodes. My name is Larry Larson, and like probably most of you in the room tonight, I'm a resident of North Hudson. I also happen to be a member of the coalition that's sponsoring tonight's forum, and I've been asked to make a few opening remarks as well as to describe the procedure that we'll be following tonight in the interest of coordinating the forum. I'll be as brief as possible so that we can stay within the 2-hour time limit that we've set for the meeting, as well as to maximize our time listening to the candidates. Now, before I get into the procedures, I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight's proceedings, as well as the 4 candidates. So first of all, Kitty Rhodes is our moderator. So any of you that don't know Kitty, Kitty is our representative at the Assembly in Madison. She lives here in Hudson, and I've known her for a few years. That's an inside joke. Okay. And let me introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. George Klein, Terry Ritchie, Joe Wackham, and Sandra Whalen. Okay. Now I'll describe the procedures for tonight's forum. The evening will be divided into 3 parts. The first part will be introductory statements from each candidate with a time limit of 5 minutes. Candidates will receive a 1-minute warning after 4 minutes, so that you'll know you got to start winding it down. Okay. Kathy Mortensen, sitting up here, will be our official timekeeper for tonight. And the candidates will give their prepared remarks in alphabetical order. Okay. The second part of the meeting will consist of each candidate responding to the same prepared question. Kitty will be handling this portion of the meeting. Responses from each candidate will be limited to 4 minutes, again with a warning issued after 3, so that you know that your time is running up. To keep the questioning process fair to the 4 candidates, the candidates will respond in alphabetical order to question number 1, and then for question number 2, we'll start with the second candidate in alphabetical order, and so on until we've gone through the questions. This way, no one candidate has to be first or last all the time. Okay? And lastly, with time permitting, we will ask all candidates any questions submitted from the audience. Kitty will handle this portion as well, and candidate responses will again be limited to 4 minutes. Now, that's what the piece of paper you received when you came in is for. So if you have a question, jot it down. When you got it done, just raise your hand. And Janet Fogg, Janet, where are you? There she is. Janet will come by, pick it up. And at the end of the second section, we'll bring them up, pass them to the moderator, and the questions will be delivered to the 4 candidates. Okay? Now, in the interest of fairness to all of you who expected this meeting to be over at 9 o'clock, we will close the forum as close to 9 o'clock as practical. Okay? But I'm sure the candidates, and God, I know Kitty will, stay around for a while afterwards if you want to talk to any of them individually. Okay? So now it's time to hear from the candidates, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kitty, and the first person that will be on the agenda will be George Klein.
Thank you, Larry. I welcome the opportunity to be on this side of the table. I've never done it from this perspective before. Before we get started, I'd like to take just 1 second to say thank you to the candidates. Our communities are successful because we have residents who are willing to share their time and talents on our behalf. And no matter what the outcome, I hope that you find this process to be not only educational but enjoyable, because I know that the whole process of being a candidate, it was very enlightening and very, very enjoyable. So no matter what, we'd like to thank the 4 of you for your willingness to serve on our behalf. And so with that, we will start with George.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kitty, for moderating this forum. I really appreciate that. And I also want to say a big thank you to the coalition for putting this, giving us the opportunity to address you, and so that you can get to meet those of us who perhaps you haven't met before. I am George Klein. My wife and I have been a resident of 214 Helen Street for 23.5 years. In that time, we have raised 2 children who we are very proud of. My daughter is 25 and a 4th grade school teacher in the inner city of Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's quite a challenge. And I might share with you a little bit of pride here. Pride in the North Hudson Elementary School, who we believe, that is my wife and I believe very strongly, that it was the influence from the teachers at that school that prompted our daughter to go into that arena. And I say arena because unless you visited an inner city school, which is very different from the confines of this beautiful little village that we live in, you'd know it's very different. We also raised a son who is, even as I speak, in the island of Fiji out in the South Pacific. We're very proud of him also. And we're very proud of the community that we live in. We moved here because it was a village, and it was, believe it or not, very similar to the community that we lived in New Jersey. The difference is that the street on Helen Street's a little bit wider than that one was, and well, there is a little less traffic, but we still enjoy it, and it's exactly what we were looking for. And one of the things that I have been a proponent of all along is progress with preservation. Preservation of the very thing that brought us, and probably you, to this community. I think most of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I believe very strongly in a participative government. That is where all of you have a say in your future. If I can use Helen Street as an example, I know something about it. I was very saddened when I found out that the people who made the decisions about what was going to happen on Helen Street and St. Croix Street, none of them lived on our streets. They lived on other streets and in other neighborhoods. Now, it could very well be said that the village is a small enough neighborhood. That may be true, but I still think that out of a courtesy to those people who would have been most affected by the changes that were about to be thrust upon them, that at least they would have had a say in their future. Some of you may recall back on April 25th, I made a presentation to the board. It was a presentation of a petition that I had taken, and it was unanimous at that time that nobody wanted the street widened. Some of you also know the survey that Sandy and I took not too long ago, and we presented it to the board, and they accepted that petition because I gave it to them, as did Sandy, and the 2 of us spoke about this. What bothered us the most was that we delivered over 60 surveys to the people who will be affected by the Helen Street project. Unanimously, not one resident on Helen Street was in favor of sidewalks, but we're getting sidewalks anyway. As I look at what's happening in the village, it amuses me that, and please bear with me on this, that we are turning into a Woodbury. But curiously enough, Woodbury has recognized the need to narrow their streets to the very width that Helen Street is now. Isn't that curious? We find no need to widen a street. In fact, I don't think you want your street widened either. I'd like to comment just briefly on what brought me to this. 1 minute? That's all it'll take. I was approached by a very dear friend who asked me if I would help her find a candidate to run for this election, or run in this election. And so I searched with her, and unfortunately we couldn't find anybody. And then on New Year's Day, it occurred to me, why don't I run? I'm somewhat hypocritical if I try to get you to run when I'm not willing to run. So that is exactly what brought me to this point.
Thank you. Terry.
Hello, my name is Terry, or my legal name is Teresa Ritchie. I've been a Hudson resident for over 15 years. I am married, mother of 3 children. I have 2 daughters. One is a senior at Hudson High School, and one is a senior at Flambeau High School. I have a 5-year-old, or a son that's 10 years old in 5th grade at the North Hudson School. I'm employed at the Hudson Physicians Clinic here in town. I'm very active in different boards at the clinic. I'm active with the Patient Advisory Council, which is approximately 20 patients who we meet with quarterly to discuss improvements with the facility. I'm also involved with the new campus that's being, we just got the approval of being built. I'm also involved with the Hudson Physicians Clinic Marketing Committee. I'm originally from Ladysmith, Wisconsin, and I moved here as a single mother, not knowing anyone in this community, and that has brought me to become very strong. And I really sympathize with the residents that have a moderate income trying to make it. And I know my main concern is, our moderate income seniors in the village in North Hudson, they're afraid of being taxed out of their home. And I know their main objective would be working in the medical field is they're going to not want to pay for their medications in order to stay in their homes. My other concern is, too, the future of the village projects as far as improvements versus a maintenance issue. My concern is, is there really a need for the different issues that's happening in the village? I'm all for maintenance. I mean, that's a general, not a homeowner's responsibility, just maintain your home. But I'm really struggling with, the idea of wanting sidewalks when, I am an avid walker in North Hudson, and the sidewalks we have now are in poorly condition, and they want now to put in more sidewalks, and there's a majority of lifelong residents who are unable to maintain those sidewalks. And you add more sidewalks, then you look at, there's going to be a fine if they don't maintain their sidewalks. My other concern is, I know they talk about the crime increasing in the village in North Hudson. As a resident, I've asked the chief of police in North Hudson of getting a crime watch program together for the village residents and work together in fighting crime. And at this time right now, there is a lack of a patrolman to be able to participate in working with the residents for this type of program. And my other issue, too, is why I'm interested in running for the village trustee is we need to evaluate the village improvements. Especially, is it truly a must in an economic crisis at this time? I mean, it comes not only from the local level, but from the federal and state level, too. I think we really need to pull the reins back and really think about, not just currently, but the future and what impact it's going to be 15, 20 years from now. And can this village be able to function financially with what the current village board is proposing to the village? Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Joe.
My name's Joe Wecken. My father is Stan Wecken. He was on the board previously. Mother Mary Wecken, brother Adam Wecken, pictured in the Star Observer as me. We moved to my residence on 608 Cedar Drive, North Hudson, Wisconsin, 16 years ago. I love it in Hudson. I love North Hudson. Love both towns. or city and town. I am currently enrolled in Hudson High School as a senior. I was on the high school football team. We got beat out, but doesn't everybody. I used to play some other sports, but due to injuries, I had to quit. Then I decided to get into other clubs such as Youth in Government, which is a organization where students become senators, representatives, people like the Supreme Court, justices, lawyers, and all sorts of other government positions, which has really brought me to the reason why I wanted to run for government, because you got to start somewhere. I believe by starting here I can get a better view of the local government, which I believe the upper government needs to pay a specific attention to, because without knowing what's going on in the town, how are you supposed to know what's going on in your district? I plan on being someone such as Kitty Rhodes. I plan on being someone in that caliber and in that arena. I currently work at First National Bank of Hudson. I'm also a youth apprentice there. What I do is I go to each department they have, meaning teller, management, all sorts, and I work there and I get to know that area of the bank. I also help out with hours when someone's on vacation or someone comes in and needs to have a substitute when they're sick. So I try to help out other people as much as possible, and I hope to help people in North Hudson as much as possible by being an open-minded person and having ideas and views, not being restrained, and that's the way it's got to be because that's the way I want it. I believe that the people should be the ones who say this is the way it should be and this is the way we want it. That's the way it should be. That's it.
Thank you.
Could the mic speak closer, a little closer for the speakers?
The microphones are strictly for the tape recording equipment. They're not for overhead. So we don't have a PA system.
Well, I just have to remember to all speak up. Thank you. Sandra.
My name is Sandra Whalen, and first I want to thank all the concerned citizens that came out tonight, because you are the people that make the difference, and I thank you here for being here, for the support, and for wanting to become involved. Louder. I've lived in North Hudson for 2 years, and that makes me a newcomer here, but I certainly don't feel like one. My husband and I chose to live here. We lived in Minneapolis for 8 years, didn't like the city. Came out, we weren't looking for a house, we weren't looking to move even. We saw our house, fell in love with it, fell in love with the view, and fell in love with the neighborhood. And every day we see something new, that we have deer in our backyard and the geese on the lake, and it's one of the things I love about home. Let me tell you a little bit about what I do. I am Deputy Director of Communications for the Minnesota House Republican Caucus. I work for the Speaker of the House in various capacities. I write for him. I write for many of the other members. I do graphic design. And I've started a new program where we communicate directly to constituents through the internet, through websites, through email, direct to citizens. And we're finding that to be very productive. The reason I'm running is that I see a widening communications gap between ordinary residents of the village and the village board. And George was talking a little bit about a poll we did earlier. It was a great opportunity for me to get out and talk to some of the neighbors I've only waved in passing and find out what they think. And people are very concerned about the direction the village board is taking. For example, they're failing to represent their interests, not only their taxes, but also the way they feel about issues. Whether, a good example is the sidewalk issue. The the sidewalks are free, so they've made that decision for us. And people don't want them. I think that there are dozens of great reasons why they don't want them. I've talked to seniors who are being taxed out of their home, projects like this, the curb and gutter, the street widening, which will be assessed 100%. Some of the things I wanted to point out are the doubling of the village spending since 1999, committing to new capital improvement projects during a recession, new borrowing in the budget, the unprecedented jump in the staff, president, and trustee salaries, and almost 25% increase in the tax levy since '99. I think the most disturbing thing is that the board is failing to respond to economic signs that people who are paying attention see. And the main issue there is the $1.1 billion state budget deficit. Well, that happens to be exactly the same number, well, close to exactly the same number as the shared revenue. The money that comes back to us is redistributed back to residents as property tax relief. We're in danger of having that cut off either in 2 years or a little bit longer. Okay. I think it's reckless to commit to spending, to commit to projects, and I think that my background and unique communication skills and government experience give me a good background for a position like this. I'm good at doing the research into complex issues and breaking them down into things that regular people can understand without having to have a degree in accounting. And one last thing, I've never been one to sit and watch a fight, and with some encouragement from some of my neighbors, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, as we said, we'll start moving down so that you don't have to go first each time. So Terry, this one will go to you first, and then to the others. It may be somewhat repetitive, but we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to include this. What education background or life experiences do you have that you believe will make you a productive and effective trustee?
Well, I have to say, I have to give the credit to my mother. My mother was the director of aging for Rusk County, and she looked out, she had a deepest concern for the seniors. And I know as a young child, I would always have to tag along with her to senior citizen events, and she has such a compassion of helping others and wanting to get involved. She always told me, if you're not going to get involved, then don't complain. And I have to say, I've learned a lot from my mother. My father, he was a deputy sheriff plus a small business owner, and it has to be both my parents. In my current experience, I worked at what used to be Fortis Insurance Company for 7 years in a managed healthcare field, and I dealt with a lot of agents and working with other people, and also my strongest field is customer service, and many times I'd have to deal with the consumer or the customer in trying to assist them in their needs. And I have a compassion wanting to help others and to listen to what their concern is. And that's why I'm here. Why I want to run is, one, there's no sense in me complaining if I'm not going to do something about it. And the other thing too is North Hudson has been my home for my family, like I said, for almost 16 years now. And my husband's been born and raised in North Hudson, and so has many of his relatives in North Hudson. And he is concerned of the changes going on in North Hudson. And I just feel that I am the voice for not only myself, but for him and for many of his relatives to keep North Hudson not like it used to be. I mean, you have to go with change it with time, but you have to look at, can the village residents feasibly, financially support what the projected future, what the current board is looking at. And you know, how many of you in the audience know of someone who's lost their job? I mean, we have to just really look at the future of the village and what an impact with all these new developers wanting to develop more land. It's a domino effect. And I just feel with my experience with project management that I had at Fortis and with my current position, that, I mean, you have to look at the big picture, what the domino effect of each project that they're looking at and what an impact it's going to be, not just the future, not just currently, but in the future.
Thank you. Joe.
First thing I'd like to say is I'm going to keep my things really short and sweet.
And loud.
Oh, and loud. Thank you. I have a real sense of communication. I believe that's a real important thing, and I believe that will help in our issues. In the youth and government thing, that's why I think I have some pretty good qualifications for this, and I have a pretty good drive for wanting to be something in life. I have a real good sense of government and a real good sense of how it's supposed to be, not how it is. Because compared to what it's supposed to be, it's nothing alike. People are supposed to have a say, and as from what I can hear from George and Sandra, and there's not really much of a say going on here. These people are not being heard, and that, I think, is one of the biggest things that needs to be dealt with. Yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you. Sandra.
I talked a little bit before about my communications background. I've worked in different positions, currently with the Minnesota House. I also worked as a state government relations manager for a trade association dealing in credit. And in that position, I would take the issues, I would go between the lawmakers and the people who the laws affected. This has always been very interesting to me. I've been involved in politics in some way since I was probably 8 years old. My father instilled in me a sense of patriotism, a sense of involvement, the need to do rather than sit in the bleachers and talk about it. I've been involved in political campaigns, and I'm not saying that because it's necessarily a good thing, but I've seen the reality of what happens in politics, and I feel I could use these experiences to make myself a better representative of government to you.
Thank you. George.
Take a little different tact. I am, by my education, a math teacher. I was 3M's adjunct trigonometry professor for 11 years because that's what I like to do during my lunch hour. I now teach for Cardinal Stritch University part-time. In fact, Wednesday night will be the last course I'll be teaching for a while if I win this election. I enjoy teaching mathematics. That's not what I do at 3M, but I enjoy doing it. I have been told that I am analytical to a fault, and perhaps that will work to the benefit of the village. You'll notice in my brochure, and if you haven't got one, please take one before you leave. I'm not stating my specific views on these issues. I'm raising the issues and asking you what you think. And I believe very firmly that a board should analyze, really analyze, talk to the experts, get all the opinions before they make their decisions. I was also on the Board of Education for 6 years. Having done that, I feel that I now have a direct route to heaven when I die. There will be no stop-off point. Some of you may remember the issues between 1984 and 1990. It was a very tumultuous time here in the school district of Hudson. And I am proud of many of the accomplishments that we were able to make during that time period. So I feel that that has also prepared me for what I am about to embark on. I've been active in my church and my community. And in my church, I've held a number of leadership roles. I just came off a 3-year term as the chairman of the Pastor Parish Relations Committee. It's basically a human resources function in the church. Now I'll tell you why the beard. I can't wait until the 25th of March at about 9:30, because by then Simon the Zealot will become George Klein again. This is for a production that we're putting on at the Phipps. If you haven't got a ticket, please call the church. It is really inspiring. Tickets are free, by the way. It is our gift to the community. What I'm trying to show is a broad experience over my past, and I don't mind saying it, I put it in the literature, 56 years. And I hope that you can see that I would be able to be working for you as well as my next door neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us now to our next question, which, Joe, you get to be first. If you are elected, how would you envision involving residents or gathering their input before making decisions, in particular capital spending decisions?
One of the easiest would be pamphlets, but that would also be kind of spendy. We could have signs up about certain things, like if you have an opinion, please come in and see it, you know, or voice your opinion on such and such date, because I'm pretty sure quite a few people in the community don't know when our board meetings are. I didn't know until this past year. You could also use, well, basically using signs and surveys would be the best, I think, forms of communication, because people then have be able to read it instead of being able to just hear it. And then there's the TV, of course, and then that is another form of communication that we have to our usage. But I'd probably say surveys would be the best idea.
Thank you. Sandra?
And the question was?
The question was, if you are elected, how do you envision involving residents or gathering their input before making decisions, in particular capital spending decisions?
Okay. I've been involved recently with the coalition that's putting on this meeting, and I hope this group holds together and really keeps the board's feet to the fire. Nice, great bunch of people with very good ideas, and I think that they are representative of the people of North Hudson. That's not to say I would limit my access to that. As a communicator, I feel I could utilize a variety of tools to get information, to share information, and to get input. One thing I would like to try is building a website using email to get the message of what's going to happen, when this meeting is, what's on the agenda, what you can do, and then report back as to what was done. I'd like to develop a better relationship with our local reporter. As a former reporter myself, I understand that the exchange of information between the board and the reporters is a very important one. On this website, Joe had a great idea with the surveys. I work for many state representatives who do surveys of their community, and their constituents really enjoy the opportunity to have input. Whether or not it makes a big difference, the fact that they had input and that their representative took this information and thought about it was wonderful.
Thank you. George?
Thank you. I think it doesn't take much. I concur with Joe and Sandy about the surveys. We've done a couple already. Sandy, what did it take, about 2 hours for us to distribute over 60 surveys? It seems to me that if you want community input, all you have to do is let people know, number one, we are seeking community input. And number two, you have to listen to them. I had a neighbor come to me just the other day. We were out shoveling snow. And by the way, I was trying to think of the positive aspects for the widening of the street and the big sidewalk and the 7-foot boulevard I'm going to get. And it occurred to me that I will have 14 feet less of driveway to shovel. So I'm not sure if that's good or not. We have a website here in the village of North Hudson. Have you looked at it? And in February, it should be done. Last February. So I'm picking up on what Sandy said because this has bothered me. This would be a great way for us to be able to communicate with our constituents. Let's get that website active. You can go on that website at any time. You can find out what the hot issues are, what's coming up, what's the agenda. Basically, what you hear all four of us saying is we want to be open to the community, not shut. We want to be open. So we have the surveys. We have, I want to pick up on the media. We have a dish, so we don't get the cable channel. So we rely on the newspaper. And I could see a section of the newspaper, Meg, where we would be able to have, this is the North Hudson page. Why not? And let's let people know what's going on in the village. I've put in my flyer something about ward representation, and that this is something maybe we ought to take a look at. By having ward representative, that representative is responsible for communicating with his immediate neighbors. As it is now, if Sandra and I were to be elected here, we both live on Helen Street, only a couple blocks away from each other. We're not sure if this is right. However, the way the wards are set up now, my neighbor across the street is in a different ward from me, so who knows how that might work. But we can be creative. If we really want input from our neighbors, if we really want them to be able to share their feelings, their opinions, then all we have to do is ask. And I know they'll come out, as evidenced by the board meetings that we've been attending lately.
Thank you. Terry.
I agree with the three of you 100% as far as communication. And I was going to say the same thing that George just said, is a section in the paper, for North Hudson. Just, FYI, this is what's happening. And also, the phone numbers would be available, and contact one of the members. I have to say, I know currently the village board does publish the minutes from the previous meetings, and they also put in the paper upcoming meetings, so I do have to say that it is published in the paper. But I think open communication, or letting the village residents be aware of this is what we need, their input. I mean, we, as a trustee, you're elected to represent the residents, and the main thing is to listen to the residents. And communication is the #1 downfall in any position, any job, any relationship you have. And I think that's the main thing, is we need to have an open communication with the village residents and listen to their needs, evaluate what their concerns are. And also, I agree too, of having a type of survey, get their input. The village of North Hudson belongs to the residents, and that's the #1 thing, is some type of communication. I'm more than happy to work with anybody, if I'm elected, to come up with a better idea of open communication with the village residents of North Hudson, either it be by paper or by survey.
Thank you. This one is a kind of a second follow-up in that same category. And Sandra, you get to be first this time. Do you favor the use of public referendums or advisory polls? And if so, under what circumstances, on the assumption that they are allowed under state statute? Because we have a little question as to whether that was recently changed or not. So if they are allowed by the state, do Do you favor advisory polls or public referendums, and under what circumstances?
That's a tough question. I do, to the extent that that I appreciate the input of the citizens. Government is run by the citizens, and therefore I have no problem bringing a question to the people. Now, I'm not sure what you mean by the advisory poll. I've never come across one of those, but...
Like a non-binding referendum.
Okay. One of the things that I've worked with in my current position is trying to bring initiative and referendum to Minnesota. And it's a very interesting process, and it's interesting why it gets shot down. I'm fully in support of letting people decide issues that affect them.
Thank you. That takes us to George. I have this little peg system going here.
That's
kind
good.
of odd.
All right. Referendums, I believe, should be held to large issues that consider the entire village and not just the neighborhood. It would not make sense to me for someone on the north end of the village to be voting on something that was going to happen, or let's say on Riverside Drive. So I can see for large capital expenditures that would involve the entire community that a referendum would be appropriate. As far as advisory polls or non-binding referendums, one of the problems with these is that the board is not bound by the majority. And yet those people who went to the ballot to vote on this non-binding referendum have every reason to believe that, well, we provided them with our opinion, now I hope they act on it based on that. I think there are other ways to gather the information, and one of them might be an advisory poll as opposed to a non-binding referendum. Referendum to me implies that I will be going into a voting booth and casting a ballot, as opposed to a poll, which is probably a lot less formal. I think we can do the same thing when we talk about polls. They can also be done by neighborhoods, as opposed to the entire village in one unit. But again, it depends on the issue. It depends on the expenditure and how many people are going to be affected by whatever decision is made.
Thank you. Terry?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Do you favor the use of public referendums or advisory polls, and if so, under what circumstances?
I would support a referendum that will impact the whole village of North Hudson, but it has to be a major impact, such as financially, the financial status of it, or as a type of impact that's going to affect the future needs of the village. But also you have to look at, is the referendum, is it truly, would it be, what I want to say is, I'm trying to think of the right words, financially appropriate to spend the money on a referendum, when in fact if you had a trying to pick this out of my head here, I'm just trying to think to separate the cost impact. It would be the money involved for a referendum. For example, say the sidewalk issue. It sounds like eventually they're talking about throughout different areas of the village. To me, that should be brought to the village residents for a referendum to vote on it. The other question I'm struggling with that you have, Kitty, I don't know how to answer that.
I've run into that before, not knowing. Thank you. Joe?
I've never really heard of an advisory poll. I've slightly dealt with referendums in actually we have a class government in our economics class. We make rules and the entire class votes on them. And I think that's fair. I don't know the financial drawbacks of the referendum compared to the advisory poll, because basically I don't know the difference. I really don't have an opinion at this time.
Okay, thank you. Now, George, this one's coming to you first. Heads up.
Of course, if any of you have any questions that you would like to submit to the candidates when we get done with this section of questioning, you just want to raise your hand. Janet will just come along quietly, pick them up. Then while we're doing that, she'll be bringing those up here. And we can do that during the course of the meeting. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. In the coming years, it's expected that developers will ask the village to annex their property, thereby expanding the current municipal boundaries. What is your opinion, or what are your general feelings about increasing the size of the village and about annexation in particular?
I had anticipated that this would come up, and I've been giving this a lot of thought. And I don't have an answer, but I do have some opinions. Somehow I didn't think that would surprise you. I have a concern about annexation. Annexation taxes the existing facilities. By annexation, would we be adding to the sewage treatment plant in Hudson? By annexation, are we adding to the police, the necessary police protection and the fire protection? I don't have those answers, but I'm very concerned about the village growing beyond its existing bounds until we do a thorough analysis of the ramifications of this annexation. How many acres are we talking about? How many houses are we talking about? There's too many questions right now. Let's analyze it.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
Could you repeat the question?
I can try. In the coming years, it's expected that developers will ask the village to annex their property, thereby expanding the current municipal boundaries. What is your opinion, or what are your general feelings about increasing the size of the village and annexation in particular?
Well, my opinion is it's kind of a domino effect. If you're looking at, if they look at annexing, you're looking at a domino effect of the water and sewer supply. You're also looking at public works. There's more streets to have to maintain. Then you're also looking at, we have more garbage pickup, so it's more to look at. Police protection, that's another issue. Anytime you're looking at growing in any area, it's all a domino effect. And to me, it also then goes to the school. I mean, you keep adding more homes, eventually it trickles down, okay, there's more children going to the school, then eventually they'll probably have to add on to the school. I mean, no matter what you do, when it impacts a community, everything's a domino effect. And I have to say, the way not only the village, but the whole St. Croix County, the way it's growing, the only people who are coming out ahead here, I have to say, are the developers. I mean, they're really impacting the whole St. Croix County taxpayers. And then it's going to trickle down to the school district. And if you look at your property tax bill, that's where a majority of our taxes are going right now. So anytime a developer wants to come in and develop more land for residential, you have to look at it's a big domino effect, not even to a village, but the overall county.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, with annexing land, you have more expenses, like we've said. What you have to think about is, are those expansions necessary, or will they help? Meaning, will more money come in than what we're spending? Will we get more money, in other words? It will add more sewage to the treatment plant, which may cause them to need more workers, or may cause the sewage bill to go up, possibly. With the streets being plowed, it's not that great of a job right now, and I think that we'd need more money for that if we annexed land, and then that would mean raising taxes. That'd be a bad thing. I don't really have an opinion on getting more land, because getting more land would further the community in other ways that have not been mentioned and that I don't know about. We could get some genius that may move in and know how to fix any problems that our village may have. You never know the outcome of something until it happens, and it can be for the better, it can be for the worse. You just gotta wait and see, I think.
Thank you. Sandra?
Growth is inevitable. I think we all saw in the last census the incredible growth in St. Croix County. But I do have to echo the sentiments of the prior speakers. There are many variables, the public works, the sewer, etc. And also, it's an expansion of the tax base, so I think that these variables have to be all taken into consideration. I have not had enough experience to say what my position on annexing would be.
Okay, thank you. Harry, from an environmental perspective, what is your opinion about decisions regarding such things as widening streets, installing curb and gutter and/or new storm sewers, and expanding the number of homes connected to the municipal sewer system?
Well, I have to say, as far as the environmental part of it, currently the sewage is dumped into the Malu, which is an environmental issue. And if you're looking at now St. Croix Station, in the future putting curb and gutter, you know, and that's going to flow. And granted, I don't know the whole scenario behind it, but to my understanding, eventually that has to flow somewhere too. And my concern is the DNR is going to have their fingers into it. And right now, I guess I feel right now everything's a natural runoff. And as long as, you know, someone is not putting hazardous waste in the ground, I just don't see what the whole issue behind wanting to change the natural runoff. And like I said before, the DNR has been on the city of Hudson and the village for the flow of water going into the Malu. Years it's been going in there, years. From what my father-in-law has told me, there's been sewage running into the Malu. And let's just say it's interesting how, you know, I guess the impression I get what's happening right now is what's happening in different board members on the village board. It's kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, of issues coming on this issue. And I'm really concerned the environmental issue of what's been happening years, and now they, you know, they want to add more to it, and who's gonna pay for that? We are.
Thanks. Joe?
I really can't say much about the St. Croix Station issue, about the sewer and water, because that means that's their money, and I'd like to hear their opinions before I can form an opinion about that, because I've lived with sewer and water my whole life, and I enjoy it because I have, I mean, who doesn't like luxury, I know? The sidewalk issue, I think of it more of a safety issue for children than I do for the joggers at night, because joggers are adults more often than not, and they know when to be in the road, when not to be in the road. Children, on the other hand, don't quite have a sense of where they're supposed to be. They're still growing and still learning from their parents. And hopefully our parents are teaching their kids to stay out of the road. In some areas, I believe the sidewalks may be necessary. They are not necessary, but maybe. It will cost a little bit of money. It will tear up a little bit of land, and may help some people shovel their sidewalks, or shovel their driveways. But I really don't have much opinion on it, because I don't know how much it'll cost, what the effect will happen to the surrounding areas, and how unhappy the people would be with it. And I still can't form an opinion about certain issues, because I've dealt with some and haven't dealt with others, and by not dealing with one, it means I need to talk and communicate with people that have dealt with both, or one from the opposite side.
Thanks. Sandra?
Could you restate the question?
From an environmental perspective, what is your opinion about such issues regarding such things as widening streets, installing curb and gutter and/or storm sewers, expanding the number of homes connected to the municipal sewer system?
Mm-hmm. Regarding the St. Croix station issue, I've heard a lot from people who want to have more voice in what is done, and I believe that once that democratic process has had its hearing, then the village will be able to make a better decision that is representative of the people. One of the interesting speakers I heard at a recent board meeting talked about how there has not been a study on the environmental impact of putting in curbs and gutters. I would like to see such a study. This is one of the issues that illustrates my problem with what is happening with the board right now. There are too many questions about what these projects will do, not just to individuals, to their landscaping, to their comfort with their own road, but there's many variables in many areas. I think the board is getting ahead of itself, and these issues should be looked at.
Thank you. George?
The village of North Hudson, especially in my neighborhood, is a large sand pile. If you don't believe me, dig a swimming pool. Dig a hole in your backyard, go down 3 inches, and all you'll find is sand. From the standpoint of the necessity for having storm sewers on a street or in a neighborhood like that seems to me to be absurd. Now, I live on the higher end, higher meaning up, higher elevation. Now, I was talking to my neighbor across the street, and I told him, I says, I feel bad that water runs down my paved driveway into your property. He says, it's not a problem. It disappears before it gets very far. I said, well, how do you feel about storm sewers? He says, completely and totally unnecessary. My concern is that we're going to be taking runoff that's come off of the street that has salts and other chemicals in it, and we're going to be flushing it right into Lake Malibu or the St. Croix. We already have a crisis, or a situation, I don't know if it's at a crisis stage yet, with Lake Malibu and the habitation in it. But nothing survives when you start pumping the kind of chemicals into that water that we're likely to have from asphalt and from salts and the rest of the chemicals that you know about. Regarding widening the streets. Widening the streets very simply promotes increased speed. Do we want that? And the answer is no. And again, I'll use the example of my own street. The speed limit on Helen Street is the same as it is on State Highway 35, 25 miles an hour. And I can sit in front of my house and watch the cars go by, and already I know they're going faster than that. And I can't help but think what's going to happen as we widen our streets from the current, in some neighborhoods, 22 to 25 feet wide, and we make them 34 and 36 feet wide just because we can. It seems like an absurd reason to me. Regarding septic systems and annexing more property, I find no compelling reason to install sewer and water in neighborhoods where the residents are satisfied with their current situation and where their system poses no hazard or danger to the environment. I don't know about you, but I have to pay sewer and water bill. $400 a year is what and I know that because my wife and I just added it up for the last 4 quarters. It's $400 a year. For those people who have a septic system and have a well, I think you know that you're nowhere near $400 a year. You can install a very good state-of-the-art septic system on your property if the acreage is appropriate, and for those of you in St. Croix Station, you already have them. You can install a modern one today for a neighborhood of $5,500. The maintenance on that is trivial compared to what I pay to maintain my swimming pool. I think I hit the points I wanted to hit on that one.
Thank you. Joe, this one's coming to you. What is your opinion about the rate of spending in the village, and specifically, what is your position regarding property taxes in general?
Since I'm not a homeowner, I don't really have an opinion on this, but but I do hear homeowners do complain about the high property tax, and I think that's absurd. Why should you be paying so much for the land that you live on? I mean, it depends on what the cost is going to, of course. Property taxes should not ever be too high. I don't know what's too high because I don't pay property taxes. I just don't think that most of the money should go to, I don't know, I just don't really have an opinion.
Okay, thank you. Sandra?
In my 10 years as a homeowner here and in Minneapolis, I've learned a lot about property taxes. And property taxes do have a good reasoning behind them. However, property taxes have become a huge burden, especially Wisconsin, Minnesota. One of the values of the property tax is that it helps to fund our schools. And I have no children, but I see the value in paying for schools. Government has certain purposes, and one of them is to educate its citizens. The other is public safety. Something needs to be done about the property tax system as it is now. One of my concerns is seniors. I've heard from a few seniors that say they are being taxed out of their home, their family homes of many, many years. I know I can't do much about it at this level, but I really think the state legislature or whoever should look into, such as Minnesota has, a senior property tax deferral system. I think that's a very good idea. But we need to look at the level of taxation and the level of services that are given to the residents.
Thank you. George?
The budget that is available to all of you is most interesting. When we look at the taxes, the property taxes that each one of us is paying, we moan and groan about how big they are. You ain't seen nothing, to coin a phrase. While we heard the village trustees being proud that only 8.2%, I believe it was, of the taxes was attributable to the village, that is today. What concerns me is the tremendous increase in capital spending. Now, taxes, when we look at it, that's what we are assessed based on the value of our home, and we pay into that for the operating budget, as it were. But what about the money that's being borrowed? If you take a look at page 4 of the budget, you'll notice that our proposed loans and transfers are increasing at the rate of almost $1 million more this year than they were last year. Someday the piper's going to want to be paid. And where's that money going to come from? You've heard that we have this STP, I believe it's STP funding for the roads. Well, you know, the governor hasn't signed that check yet. We don't have it yet. I'm very concerned that the bulldozer's going to be out there tearing up my street and St. Croix Street, and we don't have the money to pay for it. So you may say, well, I don't live on that street. It's a good thing I don't, because I'm not going to have to pay for that. It's the residents who live on the street. Oh, yeah? Well, if they can do it to me, they can do it to you. What we got to do is we've got to make sure that some of these capital expenditures are held in check. The 156% increase in capital expenditures since 1999 is absurd.
Oh, thank you.
Harry, could you repeat the question?
What is your opinion of the rate of spending, and specifically, what is your position regarding property taxes in general?
Well, if you think about it, nothing's free in this world. You know, even though they say we have this this money coming, as we were talking about earlier, for the street issue. Property tax, we've lived in our home now for 9 years. And I have to say we got our home for $79,900 9 years ago. Our assessed value now is $160,000. And I'm like, excuse me. Like, and our property taxes have gone up 3 times. We have been assessed 3 times. And all we've done is normal maintenance on our home. The difference in property taxes when they're looking at more projects, more spending, it's another domino effect. You know, it starts at the federal government and trickles down to the state, and then trickles down to your local government. And then who has to come out with the difference? The taxpayers. I think we really need to, my opinion is we really need to take a look at what are the needs versus that, such as I really need that, or maintenance issue. Maintenance issue is just an overall, that's a need, or a want versus we really, that'd be nice to have that someday. And I think we need to separate the difference between a maintenance issue and a nicety, and look at what impact it's going to be as a property owners in the village of North Hudson. I know, for example, they're looking at a new village hall facility they want to build. Who's going to, the taxpayers in North Hudson's going to have to come up with to be able to support that building. I guess I agree with George and his opinion that we've really got to start looking at where our property taxes are really going to. There's a lot of things out on the plate that not everyone's aware of that's going to be happening in the village, and we got to start pulling the reins back and saying, I think we need to put some things on hold here, because the way the economy is right now, and it is not going to change overnight either. Right now, I just think financially, we need to look at the way the spending is going on in the village of North Hudson, and seeing if financially the village residents can support that, not only now but in the future.
Thank you. Sandra, this one we'll start with you. What is your vision for the village in the next 5 to 10 years?
My vision would be one of greater communications between the residents and the board. And I would do that by encouraging involvement, getting neighbors to talk to each other a little more, bringing more people to meetings, and as I talked to before, using the internet as a tool It's very easy to look at email, and it's also a very valuable tool in keeping people up to date. I like how the village is now. I don't have a vision that shows change as much as keeping it the nice place it is to live. I'd like it to remain that way.
Thank you. George?
Well, I'll come back to what I said at the outset, and it ties in very closely with what Sandy just ended with, and that is progress with preservation. We talk about maintenance, maintaining our roads, maintaining the sidewalks we have, and making it a happy place in which to live. As far as the vision is concerned, that's part of it. But I also see an increase in what I call participative government, where the people feel that people can actually and honestly feel that they have a say in their government. When people feel that they have a say in their government and that their government listens to them, they become more involved and have a sense of ownership. And so my vision for the future would not be to expand it, but rather to preserve and maintain what we have and keep the village atmosphere that we all moved here for.
Thank you. Terry?
My opinion on the vision of the future of Village in North Hudson is, again, you know, quoting from George, is we need to preserve the village like it is. I don't, you know, my feeling is I don't agree on annexing to a developer. Again, it's a domino effect, what the impact is going to be on it. And not only that, currently, the current village needs aren't even being supported as it is now, such as sidewalks. Again, the sidewalks aren't even being maintained properly, and they want to, you know, make additional sidewalks, and they want to look at widening more streets when the whole village of North Hudson is that small town village atmosphere. I think we should just preserve it like it is, and granted, if there's a, you know, we have deer that come up in our backyard. I just feel that there isn't a need to want to make the village of North Hudson this Twin Cities bedroom community, even though the whole county's getting to be that way. But the village of North Hudson is a special place. Our kids were raised there, and my husband's family was born and raised there. It has more of a meaning to the village residents of just being the village of North Hudson, and that's why I think why majority of the residents who are here now love living in North Hudson. It's that small village atmosphere, and willing to want to preserve the way it is. Not looking at the spending in increasing property taxes of wanting to expand it into more homes, and for anything, they could use more commercial industries versus, you know, if they want to try and offset property taxes versus, you know, even if they could put in a little grocery store versus, you know, besides Tom Thumb, instead of driving all the way through town, that could offset property taxes. But I just think the vision of North Hudson, I think we need to really look at what it needs to be like, what it needs to be like 20 years from now. Do we want to have it overrun with more homes? You know, which again trickles down to a bigger school, then trickles down to we need more public works vehicles, more employees in the village.
Thank you. Joe?
I don't know, I thought George's idea for the wards was kind of a good idea for part of a vision. That way it'd help out with the public getting their say. And with Terry's idea, I don't mean to pick it apart or anything, but to get it like a more commercial businesses, you need to increase land, which would increase customers, employees, and I believe is the main reason why there is only one Tom Thumb, which is the only gas station in our community, the only quick convenience store in our community, is because there's a lack of customers for another business. There's not enough the competition wouldn't be too much to say. Because since I'm in economics right now, I've been analyzing our small community compared to a larger community like the Twin Cities, and their vast majority, or their vast variety of gas stations on 3 on a corner, because of the amount of people living nearby, because those are multi-family complexes such as apartments and townhouses. And to get more commercial, to get more commerce in our community, we have to increase community size. If that means annexing land, that would have to be the best route taken to increase commerce. Thank you.
Thank you. We're doing our strategy here. We appreciate that. We've gone through the questions that have come from the floor, and there's several common themes that are running through the questions, so we're trying to merge them into 1, 2, or 3 that we can get to before the closing comments. So George, kind of a segue from Joe's last comment, this one starts with you. The St. Croix County Economic Development Corporation works to encourage commercial and industrial growth, supplementing residential property taxes by encouraging growth in the commercial tax base. The corporation receives 1/3 of its funding from private sources, 1/3 from the county, and 1/3 from various cities, towns, and villages. The Village of North Hudson does not participate in the organization. What role do you think the village should play in economic development?
What business would like to come in to North Hudson? Perhaps would be my retort. I would agree with Joe on the standpoint of we probably wouldn't need another Tom Thumb or fast food type of a company. But by the same token, maybe what we need to do is take a look at the businesses we currently have. In the meetings that I've attended, the village board meetings, I have a sense that we currently have a rather adversarial relationship with the businesses that we do have. If the word gets out that we are going to expand and bring in some more of this commercial property, I would be very interested in what the current business people would have to say to the potential businessman who wants to come in and establish a business in the village. We are, however, running a little short on land. I'm sure there is a corner or two that we could build something on along 35, but it concerns me what type of business we would attract. And so, as I've indicated before, I would want to do some analysis of this to find out who wants to come in and what will be the economic advantages for us.
Harry?
Well, I have to say my example on the last question was I used the grocery store just for an example. But I have to say I do feel that some type of commercial growth is somewhat needed depending on what type of commercial business it would be. I mean, that's something that you know, because you have to look at the traffic. You know, if it's semis, you have to look at what the traffic impact that's going to be. So there's a concern. I would have to look at the type of business, what impact will be on the local traffic. Now, along with the local pedestrian activity and where that business would be located at. There is a small area in North Hudson that is open lots, which is, to my understanding, is owned by another business person in the village. So I would assume they're just sitting on that and waiting to be able to make some money off that land. And like I said, I'm for economic growth in the commercial industry, but depending on what type of commercial industry it is, that is something that you really have to think through and look at the overall picture of what kind of impact it will have on the vehicles and on pedestrian paths. Because right now the current small industrial area that we have, it does impact through a small residential area. So I think we'd have to look at the type of industry that we'd want, that would be interested in coming into the village.
Thank you. Joe?
Like I said earlier, I believe for commercial growth, we need land growth. It's a basic economic need. Without people buying things, you're not going to get somebody to come to your community and try to sell something. We do have a small industrial / storage area down at the old, I believe, Anderson area. I think that's what it was before, which is actually a pretty good spot for any commercial or industrial area. It may disturb the surrounding homes and that surrounding little area, but what community doesn't have those small disturbances? Along with the traffic, we have a main highway that goes right through our town. So if a company in Holton opens up, we're probably going to have more traffic going through. I mean, traffic is always going to be there, and it's congested, it's not congested. We live in a small community where it really won't have a whole lot of effect on our timely ability to get to work and get home from work. I think the best places for business would be as on the north end of our community where there's more open land. There's land that can be built on. And since that's not in the center of our community, businesses may tend not to want to be there because not as many people are going to drive by and see that. That's why a lot of businesses downtown in Hudson get a lot of business, because people drive by and see what different shops are down there, and basically it's an impulse buy. And without that ability, a lot of business owners would frown upon, or not really frown upon, but lean more towards a larger community and more towards their center, and try to find a building or an area which would better suit their customer needs.
Thank you. Sandra?
One of the first things I did when I moved to North Hudson was to look up an abstract of the town, and I was very interested in learning about the little area that was a railroad fix-up yard. I understand that area is now a tax increment financing district, that there are special tax breaks for any business wanting to locate there. I think that's something worth exploring. Second thing is, when I was looking over the village budget for the last few years, I noticed that there is exactly zero in the budget going towards economic development. You have to spend a little money to make some money. I would be interested in expanding our research into that area and seeing what is possible.
Thank you. Okay, the second question that we've kind of merged together from the themes of the audience, and I did not write this one. there's a little background that goes with it from this first one. Wisconsin currently ranks 10th in the U.S. when it comes to the number of governmental bodies in the state. Governor McCallum's budget has called for a proposed reduction of shared revenue, which will affect how we pay for services in North Hudson. First part is a two-part question. What are your views on the governor's proposed reduction of shared revenue? That's part A. And B, what are your thoughts regarding consolidation or sharing of services with other local units of government? And Terry, you get to be first. Don't ask me guys to repeat this one because I don't think I can.
Just repeat the A.
The A part, I can do that part. What are your views on the governor's proposed reduction of shared revenue, which will affect the way we pay for certain services in North Hudson? And then B is, what are your thoughts regarding consolidation or shared services with other local units of government?
Oh boy. Shared revenue. I would say it's tough to, with the existing village, how the municipalities are set up, you know, in the parks, and you have the police department. It's kind of hard to combine some of those together, to be honest with you. That's something that I would have to say I would really have to compare each one of them and see if feasibly it can be done. My other, B, could you say B over?
B, what are your thoughts regarding consolidating or sharing services with the other units of government?
I guess that is something I guess you have to look at the budget and where you can combine some of the budget funding and see if there's an area that you can combine two of the issues into one budget and not have it broken down. I have to say, until I get my fingers into it and get a better overall understanding of how the budget is run and handled, I have a hard time really expressing my opinion on that issue. So I can't make a true, fair comment about that issue.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I believe it all depends on how it's distributed. I mean, does a larger community get more money, which I believe they're entitled to because they have more people? Shared revenue, I think, is a pretty good idea because that way everybody gets something, not just, well, since you only got this is all you get, you know. I believe that to better our community and to better our state and to better our nation, things need to be shared. It may have a little thought of socialism, communist in there, but it's also part of democracy. Having everybody get what they want, or, well, not everybody get what they want, but everybody get what they need instead of what they want. And consolidating, I'm not quite sure on how effective that would be. It could damage quite a few communities. It could make some communities prosper. But with the shared, I believe that's what we're currently in right now. I believe that's working out pretty good. If communities need more money, they raise taxes, and that way it affects that community and not the other communities.
Thank you. Sandra?
I find this topic to be very interesting, and I wanted to point out that for my own understanding, I put together a flow chart, and the more I learned, the more interesting this topic really is. North Hudson stands to lose $152,000 next year. St. Croix County 935. My opinion on the governor's proposal, I believe it'll get watered down considerably before it gets out. But there's the potential there of having some serious property tax reform. But what we need to do as citizens is hold our local officials' feet to the fire and make sure they don't commit to new capital projects, that they don't borrow more as they have. The intent of the shared revenue program, which I believe has been around for almost 100 years, really changed in the 70s, I believe, became more of a redistribution of wealth. Now, I don't know if North Hudson makes out better than a lot of villages. I suspect we do, because we are commercial property tax poor. It's interesting. It'll be a thing to watch. I think it's one of the most important variables in looking at the budget and the spending trend of the current board. As far as consolidation of services, as long as North Hudson residents are given the same level of services, I have no problem with consolidation.
Thank you. George.
Reminds me of the Robin Hood principle. We take from the rich and we give to the poor. While I was on the Board of Education, we had exactly the same situation. Our tax dollars were going into the pot, and the pot was being redistributed to build nice new schools in Amory and other communities like that. While I have no problem with that, it was really hurting us and our taxpayers. It was costing us an incredible amount of money, until finally the state did revise its program, and we now get more of our own money back than we did before. The governor is a political animal and recognizes that he will have to give and take on this. And to pick up on what Sandy said, I believe too that this will probably be watered down quite a bit before we actually see it. But there's another issue here too, and that is the sense that we believe that getting federal money or state money is free money. And we've got to keep in mind that I'm waiting for my Wisconsin check to come back so I can afford to pay my federal. It's almost a wash this year, and I'm trying to balance, okay, how can I even things out so I don't have to write this check at the end of every year to the federal government. It's not free money, folks. It's my money, it's your money. And so whatever pot it comes from seems to be almost immaterial. Now let's get down to another real point here. If the governor's proposal were to go through, it may mean that because we're not going to get that money from the state, we're going to have to be a little bit more expeditious about spending our own money. And maybe some of these capital projects that we don't want anyway will be put on hold indefinitely until this free money comes along again. I talked earlier about the loans that we have outstanding. If these projects go through, we have got to stop borrowing money, no matter what the rate is. And now just briefly on consolidating services with other governmental agencies, I'm not exactly sure what this means, so I'll respond to it in the way I think it may have been meant. We already share many of our services with the City of Hudson. We share fire, emergency, sewage. My concern is that if we keep consolidating, we'll consolidate ourselves right out of existence. And the next thing you know, Lake Malibu won't be a dividing line anymore between North Hudson and Hudson, and it'll just be one big community. I'm sure that if I were to think about this more, I'd come up some more stuff, but that's going to be it for now.
Thank you. We're working really good timeline here. If we go now to the opportunity for each to do a 4-minute closing statement, and our timer will give you the warning when you have 1 minute left, telling you that 3 minutes have expired. And we're going to be really nice and give you a minute to prepare for it. Nobody ever gave me a minute to prepare. However,
We're nice.
Just so that you understand, Joe will be first, followed by Sandra, George, and Terry. That's close enough to a minute. So, Joe.
All right. I believe what
You
the
have to talk really loud so everybody can hear you.
I believe what the village really needs to work on right now, at this time and within the next few years, is not expanding, but fixing, maintaining the roads. Because I go to school every morning, I go to work on Saturdays, and I probably go to my friend's house every Sunday. But I have a problem with my entrance onto 35. There's always a big pothole. Either two of them. One I hit on the going right, one I hit going left. And if I'm going to TNT, I hit them both. But I believe that the roads need to have a little bit better maintenance. Our sidewalks, which I tend to bike to in school when it gets warmer, or hike on, or jog, whatever you may do, I believe those need to be fixed. I'm tired of stepping in big mud puddles. Those are a big problem, because they ruin my shoes. Communication with the community. The web, I think, is a great idea. Hopefully it gets finished soon. Surveys, I still think, would place a big part, and hopefully people in the community will step up and help us, either candidates or trustees, into informing our fellow neighbors and friends. Child safety, sidewalks. If we're not going to go for the sidewalks, then I hope the parents start bucking up a little bit more and teaching their kids not to be running into the streets after a ball. Walk out into the street. Don't run. You may get hit by a car. Taxes, property taxes, and other taxes that you may pay. I believe that the trustees and then candidates after this should cut the fat. There are a lot of things I believe in our community that could be cut, such as not continuing with projects that aren't necessarily needed or necessarily desired. And basically that's about it.
Thank you. Sandra.
The two issues that I wanted to talk about tonight are the growing communication gap between the residents and the officials elected to represent them. I believe this is my strong suit, being the go-between between the taxpayers and the government. I think that the current board is failing to represent people and to listen on issues such as possibly delaying the sidewalk issue. I see a spending trend that's incredible, and it's very dangerous for those of us who pay the village's bills. I think commitments are being made that will cost us for a very long time. I believe the current board is failing to take the state budget deficit seriously. That does affect us. It will affect us. We need to be alert and respond to that. I just wanted to say that regardless of whether I win or lose, I've had a great time talking to people and learning what their concerns are and becoming a part of the North Hudson community. And just in closing, I'd like to make the remark, common sense and fiscal restraint must be brought to the board before it costs all of us thousands more. If we aren't being heard, it is our duty to take back our government. Thanks.
Thank you. George.
If there were any one overriding concern that I have or something that I'd like to bring to the board, it would be to improve the relationship that the citizens have with the government that they've elected. I believe very strongly that the collective wisdom of the community is greater than the individual wisdom of any one person sitting on the Board of Trustees, whether it be me or the village president or Sandy or Terry or Joe. Collective wisdom is much greater. I'm somewhat of a wordsmith. It's what I do for a living at 3M. I'm involved with words. And I couldn't help but take a look at the word trustee and recognize that the root word of the word trustee is trust. And I think we have lost the trust in our trustees that we need to have. I'd like to rekindle that flame of excitement that people can have in their government when they trust their elected officials. And as with Sandy, win or lose, it's been very interesting learning as much as I have in the last year about our village government. I had always trusted our government. I elected them. I had friends on the board, played cards with some of them, go to church with another one, known them for years. And then all of a sudden, something happened. I was being impacted by something over which I felt I had no control. And I have really had quite an education since last March. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for moderating.
Terry.
My concern is the village current and future planning as they look at the wants versus the musts and improvements. As a resident, I feel that we need to pull the reins back and look at actual improvement needs, such as maintenance issues versus because it's a good deal and some funding available issues. I have a very strong concern for the need of a crime watch program, which involvement from village residents. As you know, we do not have a 24-hour police protection in the village. But also, we have to look at the future. By adding more police personnel, is there a possible future office personnel in the police department? So we have to look at that, what impact that's going to be. As far as the safety of the sidewalks, we have to remember the speed limit in the village is 25 miles an hour. And around the school zone, it's 15 miles an hour. Perhaps us residents need to help enforce this issue by taking down license plates numbers. Because the issue of children's safety needs to be looked at by the drivers who are speeding in the village streets and when they are dropping and picking up their children. The other issue is the widening of the streets. Is this another qualification for federal and state funding? I have to admit, I do not know the whole history behind this one. Especially when I have a hard time comprehending when the majority of the traffic in some of the village streets are homeowner traffic only. I know any project, whether it's a homeowner project or a municipality project, the cost of it in the future isn't going to go down, it's going to go up. We need to strongly think about how we can financially support as a village. My reason to be involved is, again, North Hudson is my home. The residents, my neighbors, are concerned, and by working together and communicating together, perhaps we can look at cutting down the spending and looking at the overall concern of the village, of its current and future. Thank you.
Thank you. Most of my colleagues in Madison have never ended before 4 minutes. What's up? On behalf of all of us, we would like to thank you again for your willingness to serve, and we extend our best wishes to each of you. And we know that you hope that the residents now fulfill the rest of the process and turn up to the polls and vote. And so they're doing their fair share. They're counting on you to do your fair share. And on behalf of all of us, we thank you for your participation. And I'm sure the candidates will be available for the 15 minutes that we actually finished early.